But if you feel ever so slightly squeezed in, like you feel that there's more people in this part of the world than ever before, well, guess what? You're kind of right. There was a report put out in the past couple of days by the Bureau of Statistics about population density, about how Sydney compares to other parts of the world, and certain parts of Sydney have more people living in them than places like London and Mexico City. To talk about the report, Andrew Howe from the Bureau of Statistics. Good afternoon, Andrew.
Good afternoon, Paul.
Now, obviously, comparing Sydney to London and to Mexico City has got quite a few headlines, but how did we work that out, that there are people being shoved into, well, those numbers?
Yeah, look, it certainly does make an interesting reading and makes an interesting story. The figures that have been quoted in some of the press, some of media, Sydney's media today, really focuses on the inner part of Sydney metropolitan area. So basically the Sydney local government area, which has a density of around 7,000 people per square kilometre. Now, it's not straightforward to compare that with other major cities around the world, because I think some of the other figures that have been quoted for those other major cities are more covering their metropolitan area rather than the inner parts of those cities.
Well, this is the thing. If you pick any particular area to get the numbers, I suppose those comparisons are going to start looking a little more extreme than they actually are, because I think even in the most crowded parts of Sydney, you wouldn't think that we have much in common with Mexico City, which large portions of which are slums.
Yeah, that's correct in terms of, yeah, look, you can make stats almost say whatever you like, but yeah, it does make an interesting story when you do those comparisons. But you are right there, Paul. The eastern part of the Sydney local government area, we're getting up to around 9,000 people per square kilometre. But I guess that's no surprise when you consider that takes in suburbs such as Kings Cross and areas around there, around Darlinghurst, Point, where no surprise that it is a very densely populated area.
Now, obviously, this was part of a wider report, part of which its findings were that 2/3 of the state's population is now living in this city right now. What have you seen since the last time you did a report about this, about either the number of people living in Sydney or where they are located?
Yeah, the Sydney metropolitan area is almost 2/3, as you say, of the state. Now, population shifts don't change too much year by year, so that's no surprise. An increase of 1.7% for Sydney in the last year, which is actually on par with the Australian population. And a little bit higher than the state's population in terms of a percentage increase.
So are we at the moment in the middle of what a lot of people would like to represent as a boom, or is it steady growth? Is there an obvious change in terms of Sydney and its demographics from even 5 years ago? Because there are plenty of people that would like to say that the city is dramatically different. What are the facts telling you?
Okay, yeah. Over the past 4 or so years, we've had an average increase of around 70 to 80,000 per year. And if you look at the previous 5 years, yeah, that is way higher. Before, in the early 2000s, we were talking 20, 30,000 per year. So look, certainly some relatively large increases in the past 4 or so years. But interestingly, Sydney likes to compare itself to Melbourne. Melbourne is increasing by even more. So if we look at the past 10 years, for example, as a whole, Melbourne's increased by over 650,000,
wow,
which is way above Sydney's change for around 500,000.
Now, automatically people want to turn around and say that these growth in numbers of between 70 and 80,000 people is automatically people that are moving to this city. Are you able to give us a breakdown of that growth? Are the majority of those people, frankly, babies, new people that are joining this world, or are there still the extreme majority of the 70 to 80,000 that are coming to Sydney each and every year are actually coming from somewhere else?
At the regional level, we don't have a really good breakdown of that in terms of the increase in terms of its increase in births or migration. Well, the birth doesn't change too much over time. So you would think that if the population has increased more than it has in the past, then it does essentially equate to that being an increase in migration. Now, that can be migration from overseas. It can be migration from other parts of the country. Generally, what we find in Sydney, though, if we look at the results of the last couple of censuses, is that there's more of an outflow of Sydney-siders to other parts of the country, but that's more than made up for by an inflow of people coming into Sydney from overseas.
Right. Andrew, nice to talk to you.
No worries. Thank you.
Andrew
Paul.
Howe is with the Bureau of Statistics. Interesting numbers, though, about the population density. I mean, it's rather obvious. There are more units here than there ever before. So presumably that means, yes, there are more people living closer together. But equally, and look, a lot of people, and I agree, think it is too many. It is too many when it is those things. And we've talked a lot about the idea that the changing face of our city is nothing really to do with crime. The changing face of our city is going to be about the number of units, the up versus the out. That is going to be the change. We're trying to talk to the Development Minister, and we've been trying to talk to him for a while. He's been crook, Brad Hazzard, but don't worry, we'll get him on the phone. But when you heard those numbers, between 70 and 80,000 extra people, not over 5 years, that's over 1 year, that's every year. That's an extraordinary number of people that we need to find houses for, roads, all the rest. You get it. I wanted you to hear the facts about how our city is changing, not just hear people banging on about it on the radio. What do you think? Give me a call. 13 13 32 is our telephone number.